I remember a museum I visited a very long time ago, and I don't remember too many of the other exhibits that was there at the time, and I don't know why it made such an impression on me, but there was a harpsichord. It was on the second floor of the place, and it was roped off. You couldn't touch it, even though I had an overwhelming desire to put my hands on it for some reason. But it was made like in the 1500s is when it was manufactured, is when it was built. And I don't remember exactly how old I was when I was taking a look at it, but there was something about that that really actually fascinated me. There was something directly in front of me that had been made and built and used long before I was ever born, long before my parents were ever born, long before my grandparents were even born or thought about. That was created and built at a time before America was even thought of, or the United States was not even a real place at the time it was constructed and built. I got as close to it as I could, and I just stood there kind of mesmerized by it, and I was studying it, and I was thinking, there was a whole bunch of pictures in my head at the time that I was looking at it. I could see it sitting in some really luxurious kind of old home, and I could see some young kid maybe taking lessons on it, or I could see some young schoolgirl trying to impress her friends with it, or something like that. People dressed up like they would have been dressed up in the 1500s. I was thinking about the way the world must have looked at that time. The people who had built it, all long dead. They would have had no idea that something like the world we live in today could have even possibly existed. They would have had no idea that this particular instrument, maybe that was in some wealthy individual's, living room or something like that, they would have zero idea that it would be sitting on display, a couple of, 400 or 500 years after the fact. It was really a kind of almost, I would say, a touching kind of moment for me. It was one I never forgot, obviously, or I wouldn't be talking about it in this video. And there is a reason that I'm working myself around to. It was kind of like a silent film I saw not too long ago that was restored from the early 1900s. It involves, there's not a lot of background or information about it, but it's just a little girl and her cat. There's like some kind of card or some kind of title to it. Not a lot of information about it, but anytime that I've seen certain historical items like that, or I've come across something like that. There was some paintings in a museum one time that were from the 1400s. It was from the Italian Renaissance thing that was going on at the time period. And anytime I look at something like that, I kind of have one of those kind of moments, especially when it's right in the vicinity of me. It's right where I can, almost put my hands on it. There was a clock one time in a museum. I did actually do that. It was built in like the 17th century, and it was right there. There was no ropes. I was maybe in my 20s, but I just had to touch that wood that came from another time period long before I was ever thought of, and the people who had built it are long gone. And it did something to me. Like I said, I can't exactly put it into words. I can't really even sum it up what it was like. In fact, I remember when the film The Red Violin come out, my girlfriend at the time says, "You got to go see Red Violin. You're going to love it." And of course I did love it. But all it showed me at that time is, well, it was kind of a funny feeling when I saw the film. It's the history of a violin through a few centuries. But it hit me that, well, there's other people out there in the world, is all that it struck me as. There's other people out there in the world that have seen something from a distant past and kind of got fascinated by it and kind of daydreamed about, what all has this thing seen if it could talk? There was even a show one time on like the HGTV Home and Garden channel or whatever it was, if these walls could talk. I mean, it's not what was happening to me was that unique from the human experience, but it was just something that was really quite fascinating to me, something that well, like I said, it kind of started my fascination with reading about history. It touched me in a lot of ways. Years later, when I was in the cult of AA, I remember, I don't remember the entirety of the conversation, but I remember casually, in passing, I said to somebody, I saw this harpsichord one time in a museum. They don't make them anymore, of course. And I didn't even get halfway through what I was going to tell, because for one thing, it was a pointless waste of time to try to share anything with these fucking people anyway. But I was halfway through it, and they just cut me off right in the middle of it. They said, yeah, but you won't accept God, will you? You won't accept God. And that was God talking to you. That was God, And the thing that got me about that, and I didn't know how to articulate that, and I didn't know how to put that into words for a lot of years, is that I saw a harpsichord in a museum that touched me in some kind of way, because it made me think of a time before I was born. It made me think of an item that might be here, and it might be in a museum somewhere right now. It might be there long after I'm gone. And it doesn't prove that there's something out there that wants me to work a fourth and fifth step and talk to a fucking sponsor and clean ashtrays, okay? It has nothing to do with that at all. In fact, there's no way to even prove that that was some kind of spiritual experience. It might have just been an overactive imagination. It might have been some kind of psychic TV. Okay, I got a glimpse of some psychic television channels or something like that. It could just be the fact that that certain human beings, in general, they daydream about things and they think about things. I'm willing to bet that anybody watching this video has a story like what I just told. Maybe not something to do with history. Might be, seeing approaching clouds when it's about to storm in the summertime, and it's got kind of a weird, unique vibe, I guess, for want of a better word. I'm not really an autistic person, so I don't really have all the right words in place for that. But I'm sure everybody watching this video and everybody the world over has some kind of tale like this to tell. It still does not prove that the religion of AA means anything. In fact, it proves absolutely nothing more than the fact that people dream and wonder about things, or they're moved by things emotionally. Okay, the harpsichord in the museum, for all practical intents and purposes, it didn't feel anything. It felt what I felt, in other words. The only... I did not like the book at the time. I picked it up a long time ago, but there is one line that stuck to me, and it was the only Zen that you bring to the tops of mountains is a Zen you take there yourself. The Zen you find on the top of a mountain is the state of mind as you're perceiving it. It's like one time somebody, in AA, they'll often throw this thing around about terminal uniqueness, which is a really sly, underhanded way of trying to say everybody's the same in here, so the rules of the cult apply to everybody the same, and all alcoholics think the same, and all this other kind of bullshit. But they would kind of try to categorize spirituality in that same boat. They'd say, there's the God variety type. They'd read that shit out of the back of the book about the varieties of, spiritual experience or whatever. But ultimately, they had the answer for everybody's feelings or everybody's, whatever you want to call it, mystical experiences or whatnot, as correlating back to this proves the cult is right. But let's just go way out on a limb here. Let's just say there was some long dead spirit on the harpsichord that broadcast to me a message for me to see and me personally to see. Still doesn't make AA right. It doesn't make the religious cult right. And the most important thing I think I kind of wanted to drive home with this, and it's kind of a little difficult for me to articulate it in the clear, concise way that I intended to, but AA does not own spirituality. AA does not own the fact that if you have an experience, even if you have something that's happened to you in your life that you can't easily explain, which I'm sure everybody has, I'm sure everybody's had something that they were kind of pause for a moment in wonderment about, wow, that was really something, whatever that was. AA does not have the authority or the monopoly or the ownership of what you feel and what you go through. And every experience you have is unique to you as you are experiencing it with your own set of eyes and your own set of, no human being on earth has an identical set of fingerprints. So, of course, we're all very unique. We may share some traits and commonalities, But as far as uniqueness and what you perceive and what you know, the truths that you may find are ultimately up to you when it comes to your own conclusions about whatever that is out there, the big mystery. You know, in some ways I kind of like not knowing. I mean, in some ways I kind of like the idea that there is a mystery to it, that you can't actually slap a face on it and say this is what it is, which is what AA tries to do. I know people, have, different religious ideas and religious beliefs and those kinds of things, but it just struck me how anytime you have a feeling, or anytime you have an emotion, or anytime you have this, that, and the other, AA wants to capitalize on that and tell you they understand exactly what you're feeling because you're an alcoholic or an addict or whatever it is, and they already know all about you. It used to irritate me to no end how any kind of thing you had to say, any kind of feedback, any kind of input you had to say, unless you were a member of the little ruling hierarchy clique, however you want to say that, it was dismissed. It was kind of just brushed aside. It was kind of pushed aside as, that's not really important, because what you really need to understand and what you really need to know is, which it strikes me that AA is not interested in spirituality either. It's not interested in wonder. It does that special pleading bullshit in the We Agnostics chapter where it says, haven't you ever looked at a starlit night? Well, okay, everybody's probably looked at a starlit night at one point or the other and thought, wow, this is pretty cool. It helps, by the way, if you smoke some pot when you do it. But that doesn't prove that Bill Wilson's cult religion has any more authority over you or your life or your conclusions or your willpower than any other phony con artist salesman that's going to come along and say, I know exactly what you're feeling, I know exactly what you're experiencing, and I got the cure for it, the magical this, that, and the other, if you just do these things for me. Usually a con artist or a salesman just wants to make a few quick bucks. The AA cult religion, they want your life and your soul, if there is such a thing as the existence of a soul. They want subservient, obedient membership. And they're not really interested in the big book when they're doing their little special pleading thing about, isn't it cool to believe? Isn't it grand to think about how mysterious this universe is? That's not really what they want you to do. They don't want you to dwell with an open mind about any of the things in life that you may or may not find as mystical, that occasionally may touch you in some kind of way. They're not interested in that, really. What they're really doing is saying, you have these experiences, you feel these things, therefore, because we already knew that you were going to experience these things, or you have experienced these things, the cult religion is right, and the cult religion is absolute, and the cult religion gets to tell you what your spiritual experiences are really trying to tell you, and what your spiritual experiences are guiding you to, which is more cult subservience. It was funny that they're going to take, like that conversation that I began this video with about, that was God trying to tell you something. Okay, if it's me looking at a harpsichord and feeling some kind of weird emotive thing as a result of it, there's no clear-cut message from this. There's no writing on the wall that says you must go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meetings because you felt wonderment when you were a young man and saw a harpsichord that was built in the 1500s. AA tries to hijack the word spirituality, and to be honest, the word spirituality can be stretched in so many kind of ways that it's almost completely meaningless. It's kind of like, if you don't have a clear-cut definition of what that is, then you can apply it to anything and apply it to everything, and it becomes kind of useless. It was like, one kid was trying to say one time he was going into a liquor store and he saw AA bumper sticker on the back of a car, and he knew he couldn't go in the liquor store then, and it was God telling him something. Well, first of all, that story sounds so neat, and it sounds so contrived that I don't even believe it's true. But there again, you're saying that something in the universe out there, with all these millions of people in the planet and on the world, with all these millions of different things that are happening, with all the turmoil, with all the turbulence that's happening in the modern world around us at any given moment, that something was concerned about you going into a liquor store and buying a bottle of booze. To me, that's it's funny they talk about being humble and all this other soul-crushing shit that they feed you about. You're not unique. You're not nobody. But they think the entire universe and every type of experience that you have that gives you some kind of a spiritual feeling is all about them. It never occurs to them that the entire universe does not revolve around them, But they'll tell you that they're working on having no ego today, and they'll tell you they're working on practicing humility. I'm supposed to believe that with a war in the Ukraine, with a recent school shooting, with all the other stuff that's happening in the United States right now, all around the world. I mean, I know I said United States after I just said Ukraine-Russian war, but I'm saying everything in this country, everything around the world, everything right now is happening. But something is worried about me going into a liquor store and taking a drink because AA Higher Power just doesn't like it when I do that. I mean, it's funny how, given some time away from it, it all looks just so ridiculous to me now. But I used to take the shit they were saying so seriously. But I think I'm starting to ramble at 15 minutes and 37 seconds. So that's just a kind of some random thoughts I had about that. And I'm not sure if I articulated that well enough or not. AA tries to cap what spirituality is. AA tries to put limits on what spirituality could be. And AA defines the word spirituality for you. It doesn't let you kind of be free to think and wander and be open and, whatever. Anyway, until next time.